This lab, or this video, is designed to go with the lab that you need to complete before we start section 4.1. And I'm going to go through step by step the things that you need to do with your calculator to be able to answer the questions on this lab. What you need to do is watch the video and work your calculator at the same time. Pause the video where you need to give yourself extra time to actually complete the keystrokes. Pause the video where you need to answer questions on your worksheet. But if you'll do this with me, I'll take you step by step pretty much through everything you need to do, and it will be, I think, pretty clear what the correct answers should be to fill in the blanks. Alright, so we want to start by generating a list of numbers from 0 to 360 counting by 10. So we're going 0, 10, 20, and so on all the way to 360. We want to work with these numbers in our list. So we're going to go to Stat, Edit. If you happen to have any extra stuff in there, clear your lists out. We're going to be using list 1, list 2, and list 3. Now, you could start with 0 and enter, and 10 and enter, and so forth, but that's going to take you a little bit of time. It's going to be a lot faster if we just go straight to asking the calculator, let me clear out what I did, to generate a sequence of numbers for us. The way you get to sequence, now what you see on my screen is what you'll see if you're working with a TI-84 with the very newest operating system. Those of you with TI-83s or 84s with older operating systems won't see exactly the same things, but you won't have any trouble getting what you need in your calculator. Alright, so the sequence command is under the second function of stat, takes you to your lists, right arrow over to ops, and it's the fifth option down that menu is the command we need. Okay. Now I've already done this. You need to enter X for the expression. Use your down arrow key to enter X for the variable, 0 for the start, 360 for the end, 10 for the step, and then right down arrow, one more time to get on paste and press enter. Now, this is what you're going to actually need to type in if you're working with one of the older versions of the calculator. Let me get to the front of this. Okay, when you press second stat and choose that sequence command from the ops menu, you should see SEQ and the opening parentheses. Then you'll type in the X, comma, 0, comma, 360, comma, 10, and close your parentheses. When you press enter, the numbers should pop into the list 1. Okay, next, item number 2 on the worksheet, we need to make sure the calculator is set to work in degree mode. So press the mode button. The third line down is where the calculator is showing you if it's working in radians or degrees. You need to switch that over to degrees if it's not already there. And then go back to your list editor. Okay, and in list L2, we want to enter the cosine of L1. So again, you've got to have your cursor on the header, press enter to get it blinking down there in the entry line, and then we're going to type in cosine of L1, which is second 1, close your parentheses. Now what's going to happen is that we're going to have an entry in list 2 generated for every entry in list 1 that's going to be the cosine value of the number in list 1. So when I press enter, you should see those numbers appear. So the first entry in list 2 is the cosine of 0. The second entry in list 2 is the cosine of 10. Okay, calculators work in degrees, so we're thinking 0 degrees, 10 degrees, 20 degrees, and so on. Similar keystrokes to get the sine values for your angles in list 3. Sine of L1. Okay, and if you don't have numbers that match the ones on my screen, go back and check the mode. Make sure you're working in degrees. All right. So we're going to graph a scatter plot, and I need you to use those window settings, -3 to +3 and -2 to +2 for x's and for y's, and then go to second y equals. Ought to mention, if you have any equations in y1, you should clear those out, and then go to the stat plot menu. We're going to turn on plot 1, make sure that the type has a scatter plot selected, and then the ordered pairs we want to graph are in the form L2, L3. So our X list is L2, the second function of the 2 button. The Y list is L3, which is the second function of the 3 button. And it really doesn't matter what mark you use. It's going to be a little bit easier to see some things if we use the little dot instead of the box, but any one of those 3 is actually going to be fine. Now when you press graph, we should all be looking at a very similar screen. The only difference might be what shape you decided to use for the mark. Alright, now at this point, in just a minute, you need to pause this video and answer question 5. You're going to describe what you see on your screen as completely as possible. If you recognize that as a particular geometric shape, say a circle, tell me that it's a circle. Okay, and if you do see a circle, hint, hint, what circle is it? Be specific. Tell me what's the center and what's the radius of that circle, because that's pretty important information. Okay, while you've got your video paused, think about it and answer questions 6, 7, and 8. Now to restart and get jumping in on question 9, we're supposed to press the trace button, okay, which pops the cursor up on the screen, and it's located on the very first point generated by our list. So what we've got here, the ordered pair 1, 0. Think about what list 2 is. It's the cosine of the angle. Our first entry corresponds to an angle of 0 degrees, if you'll remember that first entry in list 1. So that ordered pair we're looking at is the cosine of 0 degrees and the sine of 0 degrees. If I use my right arrow key from here, hit it 2 or 3 or 4 times, doesn't matter, you'll see that your cursor travels around this circle in a counterclockwise direction. That's important. It should be moving counterclockwise. So right arrow until you've got your cursor positioned somewhere in the first quadrant, doesn't matter where. Go back to the home screen and type in the expression x squared plus y squared. Now to get y, you press alpha 1 and then the exponent for 2, just like you would normally. Press enter, and we should all be seeing the same number. We probably didn't have our cursor in the same position. If you think you had your cursor at exactly the same place I did, go back and move it. Put it somewhere else and try this again. Okay, so now you're going to answer question 9. When you get ready to move on to question 10, you're going to position your cursor somewhere, continuing to hit your right arrow key. Position the cursor somewhere in the second quadrant. Go back to the home screen and evaluate x squared plus y squared. What your calculator's doing here is when you've got an x and y ordered pair displayed on your graph screen, what's the calculator's doing is it's stored the value -0.5 in for x, and it's stored the value 0.8660254 in variable y. So anytime, if the cursor's sitting right here, anytime I type in an x, the calculator thinks, -0.5. Anytime I type in a y, the calculator thinks 0.8660254. So that's how that works. Alright, so answer questions 10, 11, and 12. And then there are going to be some things that we talk about in class now that you've completed these questions.